Madam President, I want to take a moment to reflect a little bit on this impasse we find ourselves at. The senator from Indiana is going to join me in a discussion here, and I will have a unanimous consent request along the way here. First of all, as to where we are, as we all know, we are at an impasse here in how to fund the roughly 40% of the federal government that's funded through discretionary spending, the spending that Congress controls, the spending that's supposed to happen through the ordinary appropriation process, but doesn't around here. And as we address this, it's become obvious that every single Republican in the House and the Senate wants to defund Obamacare as a step in the direction of completely repealing this completely unworkable bill. But all the Democrats support Obamacare, and they want to implement it, and they want to fund it, and they want to move forward. Well, the impasse arises, obviously, because the Democrats can't have their way in the House, where the Republicans are in control, and we Republicans can't have our way in the Senate, where the Democrats are in control. So, Madam President, I have a suggestion. My suggestion is maybe there's a third way. Maybe this doesn't have to be completely binary. Maybe this doesn't have to be an all-or-nothing proposition in which one side completely wins and the other side completely loses. Now, I would hope that even among my Democratic friends who are big fans of Obamacare, I would think that there's nobody who actually thinks that's a perfect bill. I can't imagine that when the American public has made it clear overwhelmingly their opposition to this bill, when you can't pick up a newspaper in America today without reading a front-page story about the huge problems and costs and negative effects that Obamacare is creating. I can't imagine that anyone thinks this is all perfect. So here's my suggestion. Why not repeal a few of the more egregious flaws that have been acknowledged as flaws on both sides of the aisle? Those things that are not working, that are most problematic, just a few. Couldn't we do that and at least make some progress? So the three items that I have in mind are the subject of my unanimous consent request. One would be repeal of the medical device tax, which is one of the most egregious flaws in this badly flawed bill, and I'll speak some more about this tax in a little while. A second would be to delay for 1 year the individual mandate, and I think Senator Coates from Indiana is going to speak a little bit more about how important it would be to delay that individual mandate. And the third would be to protect the religious freedom of those who object based on deeply held religious views. They object to the contraception mandate that is imposed on them, including faith-based institutions. So I'm going to request that we consider these amendments. That's all. Just asking for an up or down vote on these amendments. I think that's a pretty reasonable request. Every one of these has had bipartisan support. By the way, the repeal of the medical device tax, that was supported by 79 senators. 2/3 of the Democratic senators voted in favor of an amendment to repeal the medical device tax, and every single Republican. That's not even controversial anymore, to repeal the medical device tax. They all have some level of bipartisan support. Taken together, they're about budget neutral. Repeal of the medical device tax would cost the government some revenue, but the delay of the individual mandate would save the government expenses, so it's about revenue neutral. This could probably speed up the whole process. If we allowed these amendments, frankly, they'd probably all pass. And if they became part of the underlying bill, and if Senator Reid has the votes to pass the amendment that he wants to pass, what would go back to the House would probably pass the House. And it probably wouldn't have to get ping-ponged back here and risk a government shutdown. And finally, Madam President, it would break this impasse. And it would demonstrate that we're at least able to come together on the things where there's bipartisan agreement. So I think the most reasonable thing in the world is to have the vote. That's all. I don't know for sure how it'll turn out. I think it'll pass because these items have demonstrated bipartisan support before, but I think it's unreasonable not to be able to have the vote. And so, Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the pending amendments be set aside and it be in order to call up the following amendments which are at the desk. Number 1971 to repeal the medical device tax. Number 1972 to delay the individual mandate. Number 1973 to protect the religious freedom. And I further ask consent that each amendment be limited to up to 1 hour for debate, equally divided in the usual form. I further ask consent that following use or yielding back of time on each of the amendments, the Senate proceed to a vote in relation to each amendment with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Madam President,
Senator from Montana.
I object.
Objections heard.